For more than 4 decades, Pat Sajak stood as a quiet constant in American television, a figure whose calm voice and easy smile welcomed millions of viewers into their homes every night. From the moment he first appeared on the Wheel of Fortune set in December 1981, Pat became more than just a host. He became a familiar presence, a comforting figure in a world that often felt fast and unpredictable. Audiences assumed he would remain in that role indefinitely, that his steady demeanor, subtle humor, and calm authority were unshakable, almost eternal. Yet behind the smile and the familiar on-screen routine, Pat carried a weight that few people outside his inner circle could understand. This was not a burden caused by fame, the pressures of ratings, or the constant scrutiny of television executives. Instead, it was a deeply personal responsibility he had taken on, a sense of duty to the show, its contestants, and the millions of viewers who had come to see Wheel of Fortune as more than just a game show. For Pat, the show was a space where families gathered, where children learned letters and words, and where adults could take a brief break from life's difficulties. Over time, however, what began as a fun job and a career opportunity grew into a responsibility that weighed heavily on him. Pat knew he had to maintain a certain image at all times, to be calm, reliable, and charming, even when he was exhausted, unwell, or facing challenges in his personal life. Behind the cameras, life was not always as steady as it appeared on television. He had experienced losses, health scares, and the quiet stress of maintaining a public persona that demanded perfection. Long before he became the face of Wheel of Fortune, Pat's story began in Chicago in 1946, where he was born Patrick Leonard Sajak into a working-class family that faced its own struggles and uncertainties. His father passed away when he was young, leaving his mother, Joyce, to raise him with quiet determination in a modest household that lacked both stability and wealth. These early experiences shaped Pat's perspective on life, instilling a resilience that would later help him navigate the pressures of fame and the unexpected twists of a broadcasting career. As a boy, he found escape and inspiration in late-night television, particularly watching Jack Paar on The Tonight Show. These hours of quiet observation sparked a fascination with the world of media and storytelling, planting the seeds for a future career that would eventually take him far from the familiar streets of Chicago. Pat's early adulthood involved the typical challenges of a young man in the 1960s, attending college, working long hours to make ends meet, and seeking opportunities that could transform a modest life into something more meaningful. He enrolled at Columbia College Chicago while working as a hotel desk clerk at the Palmer House, a job that taught him patience, discipline, and the value of connecting with people. But it was a small opportunity at WLS Radio, hosting a teen DJ segment, that gave him his first real break. His voice, naturally steady and engaging, allowed him to stand out, and this early success hinted at a career far beyond what he had imagined. Yet, as his ambitions began to take shape, the Vietnam War intervened. In 1968, Pat joined the United States Army and was assigned to Armed Forces Radio in Vietnam. There, every morning he began his broadcast with a now-famous line, "Good Morning, Vietnam," years before Robin Williams brought it to global attention in film. Behind the microphone, he experienced the same fears, uncertainties, and fragility that every young soldier faced in a war zone. The war did not break him, but it left a lasting impression, teaching him how fragile life could be and how quickly circumstances could change. Returning home in 1970, Pat attempted to rebuild a civilian life. He moved through a series of radio jobs before transitioning into television, first as a weatherman in Nashville and later in Los Angeles. His humor was dry, his presence understated, and his professionalism reliable. Yet at that time, no one could have predicted that Merv Griffin, the creator of Wheel of Fortune, would notice him and ultimately select him to host a show that would become a cultural phenomenon. Pat's rise to national prominence was gradual and almost accidental. He wasn't flashy or flamboyant. He didn't command attention in a way that forced people to notice him. Instead, his appeal was in his quiet consistency, his ability to make viewers feel at ease, and his genuine approach to interacting with contestants. NBC executives initially resisted, claiming he lacked charisma and fame, but Griffin insisted he's a guy, and eventually Pat stepped onto Wheel of Fortune stage, beginning a partnership that would last decades and change American television forever. Once Pat Sajak became the host of Wheel of Fortune, the transformation in his life was both immediate and profound. The show was no longer just a job. It became a part of the fabric of his daily existence and, in many ways, a part of his identity. Night after night, millions of viewers tuned in to watch, and in doing so, they came to expect a certain consistency from him. Pat's calm demeanor, quick wit, and gentle humor created a space where audiences could feel relaxed and entertained. Contestants, too, responded to his approach. He never tried to overshadow them. He gave them space to shine while subtly guiding the flow of the game with a combination of professionalism and friendliness. Vanna White joined the show a year later, in 1982, and from the very beginning, their chemistry was natural, effortless, and authentic. They didn't need to act. They simply interacted as two people who respected each other's timing and presence. Together, they created a rhythm that made the show feel familiar yet lively, comforting yet exciting. By 1983, Wheel of Fortune had entered national syndication, and Pat's face was appearing in homes across the United States every evening. For the once quiet boy from Chicago who had stayed awake watching late-night television, this was almost unimaginable. Yet, even as the popularity of the show grew, Pat began to feel the subtle but persistent weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He wasn't just entertaining people. He was maintaining a ritual, a daily half hour of normalcy and happiness for millions. This responsibility was invisible to the outside world. Fans assumed he was unshakable, immune to stress, and eternally patient. In reality, Pat was acutely aware of the delicate balance required to maintain the show's tone. Every joke, every interaction, every expression had to fit within an unspoken standard. Over time, the demands grew heavier, amplified by the increasing scrutiny that came with fame. As television evolved, so did the challenges of his role. The internet and social media transformed the way people watched and commented on television. A playful remark or small mistake could be clipped, shared, and criticized within moments. Pat, who had always been careful to remain charming and professional, found himself navigating an environment where even a harmless joke could generate controversy. He experienced this firsthand with incidents in 2021 and 2023 that went viral online, creating debates over what was appropriate or funny. These events, while minor in reality, reminded Pat that the expectations of audiences had changed. What was once effortless now required careful calculation, a mental energy that was invisible to the viewers but tangible too. Meanwhile, Pat's own life was shifting in ways the audience could never see. In 2019, he experienced a sudden and severe medical emergency, a major intestinal blockage that could have turned fatal if not treated in time. During that frightening experience, Pat confronted his mortality in a way that transcended career worries or public perception. Lying in a hospital bed, facing the possibility that his life could be abruptly ended, he thought not of his fame or his role on television, but of his family, his wife Leslie, his children Patrick and Maggie, and the moments he could no longer take for granted. Surviving the ordeal changed something fundamental in Pat. Returning to the show afterward, he continued his work with the same professionalism and humor, but a quiet shift had occurred internally. Time, once abundant and almost infinite, now felt fragile and limited. Every moment with his family, every day of life, became more precious, and the pull of the studio lights was no longer the same. Pat understood that while the show could continue without him, his presence had been part of its identity. He had created a comforting, familiar routine for millions, and the thought of leaving was not one taken lightly. Yet, the combination of public scrutiny, evolving expectations, and personal health made it impossible for him to ignore the truth any longer. Over time, the thought of retirement, once hypothetical, became inevitable. Pat realized that leaving was not a failure, nor a surrender to age or criticism. It was a deliberate and thoughtful choice, motivated by love for the show, respect for the audience, and care for himself and his family. By stepping aside, he ensured that Wheel of Fortune could continue as a cherished institution without compromising the standards he had worked so hard to uphold. Retirement was not about leaving in disgrace or escaping responsibility. It was about preservation. Preservation of the show's legacy, of the relationships he valued, and of the moments he wanted to enjoy outside the studio. The decision, though quiet and personal, carried immense emotional weight. Pat Sajak, the man whose calm presence had guided millions for decades, had to reconcile the version of himself the public expected with the version of himself he needed to survive and thrive in life. His departure marked the end of an era, but it was also a beginning, the start of a new chapter in which he could rediscover life beyond the half-hour television that had defined him for so long. It was a choice that reflected not weakness, but wisdom, and one that highlighted a truth often hidden from fans. Even those who seem unshakable have limits, and choosing to honor those limits is not only brave, it is necessary. When Pat Sajak finally announced that his time on Wheel of Fortune was coming to an end, the news reverberated across the television world and among viewers who had grown up watching him for decades. To millions, he was more than just a host. He was a symbol of stability, a familiar presence in living rooms across the nation. His departure was met with disbelief, sadness, and a sense of nostalgia, as if an era itself were quietly ending. For Pat, however, the decision had been quietly forming for years, shaped not by fame or public pressure, but by a combination of personal reflection, health considerations, and a deep understanding of the responsibility that came with his role. The events leading up to his decision were gradual, almost imperceptible to the audience. After his 2019 surgery, which had brought him face-to-face with his own mortality, Pat began to see his life differently. Time, once taken for granted, now felt precious and fleeting. He realized that his identity, long intertwined with the show, could not remain tethered to a studio set indefinitely. The work itself was rewarding, yes, but it required a constant emotional presence, a careful balance between humor, patience, and attentiveness that had become more taxing over time. The landscape of television was also changing. The rise of social media meant that every comment, gesture, and facial expression could be analyzed, critiqued, and shared without context. What had once been simple banter or playful interaction with contestants could become the subject of online debate, sometimes generating negative attention that Pat had to navigate delicately. This constant scrutiny, combined with the natural effects of aging, added to the weight of his decision. Pat's farewell, therefore, was not abrupt or reactive. It was a deliberate, thoughtful choice made with both the show's legacy and his own life in mind. On June 7, 2025, he stepped onto the set for his final episode, carrying the calm demeanor that had defined his career. Yet beneath the surface, he felt the profound emotional impact of leaving behind a role that had shaped his life for more than 40 years. In his closing remarks, Pat spoke with quiet honesty about the responsibility he had always felt to maintain a safe, welcoming environment for contestants and viewers alike. He shared that over time, the show had become something larger than any one person, a cultural institution that could thrive beyond his presence. This acknowledgement was both a reflection of humility and a demonstration of foresight. Pat recognized that the show's value did not depend solely on him, but on the collective efforts of the production team, his longtime co-host Vanna White, and the audience that continued to engage with the program night after night. The emotions behind this farewell were multifaceted. There was a sense of relief, knowing that he could step back and focus on personal life without sacrificing the integrity of the show. There was also sorrow, an acknowledgement of the bittersweet nature of leaving a role that had defined him for decades. Yet, perhaps most importantly, there was a quiet pride in having maintained the show's standards, ensuring that Wheel of Fortune remained a place of enjoyment, learning, and family connection. Transitioning to a new host was a critical part of this process, and Pat was deliberate in supporting this change. Ryan Seacrest, a polished and experienced television personality, was announced as a successor, chosen to continue the tradition of professionalism and charm that Pat had established. Vanna White remained on the show during the transition, providing continuity for viewers and reinforcing the familiar rhythm that audiences had come to love. Behind the scenes, the production team worked diligently to ensure that the show's quality remained consistent, managing the delicate balance of honoring Pat's legacy while embracing the future. Ratings remained strong, demonstrating the enduring appeal of Wheel of Fortune and confirming Pat's belief that the show could thrive without him. Even after retirement, Pat agreed to serve as consultant for several years, offering guidance and support while stepping away from the daily demands of hosting. This arrangement allowed him to maintain a connection to the program he loved while prioritizing personal health, family, and a quieter aspect of life that he had long postponed. In doing so, he demonstrated a remarkable understanding of legacy and personal well-being, the recognition that leadership and impact do not always require constant visibility, and that stepping aside at the right time can preserve both the integrity of one's work and the richness of one's personal life. Pat Sajak's farewell was therefore both an ending and a beginning. It marked the conclusion of a chapter that shaped television history, while also opening the door for a new phase of life, one that allowed him to rediscover personal priorities, nurture family relationships, and reflect on a career that few could ever imagine replicating. His decision underscored a timeless truth. Even those who appear unshakable, who have carried the expectations of millions for decades, must eventually listen to the quiet guidance of their own lives and make choices that honor both their past and their future. For viewers, Pat's departure was a reminder of the profound connection between entertainers and the people who watched them. And for Pat himself, it was the start of a new journey, one guided not by ratings or fame, but by family, health, and the simple joy of living a life beyond the half hour that had defined him for so long. After stepping away from the host chair, Pat Sajak entered a phase of life that was at once unfamiliar and deeply rewarding. For decades, his identity had been intertwined with Wheel of Fortune. The steady rhythm of the show, the familiar cues of the set, the interactions with contestants, and the nightly engagement with millions of viewers. Suddenly, all of that structured routine was gone, replaced by a quieter existence that required him to redefine himself outside the context of the show. At first, this transition was challenging. The habits and mindset developed over 40 years of television hosting could not simply be turned off. Pat had spent so much of his life responding to cues from cameras, producers, and the live audience that the absence of that environment felt strange and even disorienting. However, he quickly began to discover the joys of time spent without scripts, schedules, or studio lights. Everyday life, once fragmented and secondary to the demands of production, took on new significance. Meals with his wife Leslie, conversations with his children Patrick and Maggie, and simple moments of reflection became opportunities for connection and meaning that he had long postponed. The health scare he had experienced in 2019 had already altered his perspective, but stepping away from the show solidified a commitment to living with intention and awareness. Pat found that small pleasures, walking outside without worrying about makeup or cameras, reading books he had never had time for, or traveling to visit friends and family, carried a weight and importance that no episode of television could replicate. Beyond personal enjoyment, retirement offered Pat the chance to mentor and consult in ways that were far less demanding than daily hosting. As a consultant for Wheel of Fortune, he could offer guidance, share insights, and help maintain the show's quality without the exhausting responsibility of appearing on every episode. This new role allowed him to contribute meaningfully to the program's ongoing success, while prioritizing his well-being and family life. It was a balance he had long sought, though he had never fully realized until stepping away from the stage. His departure also allowed Pat to reflect on the cultural impact of Wheel of Fortune and the place it held in the lives of viewers. The show had evolved far beyond a simple game program. It became a touchstone for family traditions, a shared experience that connected generations, a source of comfort in an often chaotic world. He thought about children learning letters, families gathering to watch together, and viewers who had relied on the show as a nightly ritual. Pat's influence, though subtle, was profound. He had helped create a space that encouraged learning, laughter, and connection. This perspective reinforced the wisdom of his decision to step away. By retiring at a time of his choosing, he ensured the integrity of the program remained intact while also freeing himself to live fully outside its boundaries. Pat also observed the broader changes in television and culture with keen awareness. The landscape he had entered in 1981 was vastly different from the one in 2025. Social media, online criticism, and the constant scrutiny of public figures created a pressure that no host of his generation had anticipated. While he had always navigated these demands with grace, the cumulative effect of decades under the public eye contributed to his decision to retire. By leaving, he not only preserved his own well-being, but also sent a subtle message about the importance of boundaries and self-care, demonstrating that even the most iconic figures must honor personal limits. Beyond health and career, Pat's retirement allowed him to focus on the intangible aspects of life. His legacy, his relationships, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. He spent more time with Leslie, nurturing their decades-long partnership, and with Patrick and Maggie, building memories and deepening connections that would last long beyond the television cameras. The transition also offered a chance to engage with hobbies, interests, and activities that had been secondary to his career. In doing so, Pat discovered that life after television could be just as meaningful, if not more so, than life on screen. While fans would always associate him with Wheel of Fortune, Pat's post-retirement years became a personal renaissance, a period in which he could define success on his own terms. His story illustrates a universal truth about careers, identity, and aging, the ability to step back, to prioritize what truly matters, and to embrace change as a mark of wisdom. Pat Sajak had spent a lifetime creating joy and comfort for millions, and in retirement, he turned that same focus inward, finding fulfillment in family, health, and self-discovery. The legacy of his 44 years on Wheel of Fortune remained secure, and yet, in stepping away, he proved that true fulfillment comes not only from public recognition, but also from the quiet, meaningful moments that make life rich and complete. The transition of Wheel of Fortune after Pat Sajak's retirement was handled with care, precision, and understanding of the show's cultural significance. The producers knew that for millions of viewers, this was not just a television program. It was a ritual, a comforting half-hour that had accompanied families for generations. Selecting a successor to Pat was therefore more than a casting decision. It was about finding someone who could embody the qualities that had defined the show for decades: warmth, humor, professionalism, and a steady presence that allowed contestants and audiences to feel at ease. Ryan Seacrest, a familiar and polished television personality, was chosen to take on this critical role. His reputation for charm, quick wit, and hosting versatility made him a logical choice. But even so, stepping into a position held by Pat Sajak for over 40 years was no small task. Fans and critics alike scrutinized the decision, aware that any misstep could threaten the delicate balance of tradition and change that the show required. To ensure continuity, Vanna White remained on the show, serving as both co-host and a stabilizing force for viewers. Her decades-long partnership with Pat had become iconic, and her presence helped bridge the gap between the familiar past and the uncertain future. Behind the scenes, negotiations with Vanna were complex, particularly as it was revealed that she had not received a raise in nearly 2 decades. Despite this, her dedication to the show and her commitment to supporting Ryan Seacrest during the transition demonstrated her professionalism and deep investment in the program's continued success. The production team also took deliberate steps to preserve the familiar elements that audiences loved. Set design, music cues, and pacing remained consistent, maintaining the recognizable rhythm that had made Wheel of Fortune a trusted presence for over 40 years. At the same time, small updates and refinements allowed the show to evolve subtly, reflecting modern tastes without undermining the traditions that viewers held dear. Ratings confirmed that these efforts were successful. Even with a new host at the helm, the show continued to draw millions of viewers weekly, a testament to the enduring appeal of the format and the careful planning of the transition. Pat's legacy remained palpable, influencing both the tone of the show and the approach of those now leading it. This balance of continuity and change was critical. While Ryan Seacrest brought his own personality and energy, he was guided by the foundation that Pat had built, a space where contestants felt comfortable, where families could enjoy wholesome entertainment, and where learning and laughter coexisted seamlessly. The move demonstrated a profound understanding of television's evolving landscape, acknowledging that while personalities are important, the essence of the show, the experience it delivers to viewers, must endure. Pat's role in this transition, though behind the scenes, was significant. By agreeing to serve as consultant, he ensured that the values, timing, and subtleties of hosting that had defined his tenure were communicated to the new team. He offered insights on pacing, humor, and audience interaction, helping Ryan navigate situations that might otherwise have been challenging. This mentorship preserved the spirit of the program, while allowing the next chapter to unfold organically. The careful orchestration of this transition highlighted the respect and thoughtfulness Pat had consistently brought to his career. Retirement did not mean disengagement or absence. Instead, it reflected a shift from active hosting to stewardship, from daily performance to guiding the show's future without compromising its quality. Fans, initially apprehensive, gradually embraced a new era. While the emotional connection to Pat remained strong, the show's continuity reassured viewers that Wheel of Fortune could survive and thrive beyond its original host. Rating stability, critical reviews, and audience feedback all pointed to the success of this approach. For Pat, Observing the show continue successfully without him was both comforting and emotionally complex. It validated his decision to step aside, while highlighting the bittersweet reality that the program, which had been such a central part of his life, no longer required his daily presence to remain strong. The combination of Ryan Seacrest's hosting, Vanna White's continued presence, and production team's careful attention to detail ensured that the legacy Pat had built endured. In this way, Wheel of Fortune demonstrated a rare example of seamless transition in television history, preserving both the familiarity that audiences cherished and the flexibility to evolve for new generations. Pat Sajak's departure, therefore, was not just an ending. It was a thoughtful, deliberate step that allowed the show to continue its cultural impact while giving him the space to live a full and meaningful life outside of the spotlight. This careful planning, combined with respect for the program's history and the values it represented, ensured that the show's place in American television remained secure, proving that legacies are strongest when they're preserved through thoughtful succession rather than forced continuation. Retirement offered Pat Sajak more than just freedom from the studio. It provided a rare opportunity for deep reflection on a life spent in the public eye and the responsibilities that fame carried. For over 40 years, he had been more than a television host. He had been a symbol of stability, a quiet presence in millions of living rooms, and a figure whose demeanor and professionalism shaped the rhythm of American evenings. Yet behind the smile, the jokes, and the calm tone that viewers took for granted, Pat had navigated a complex mix of pressures, expectations, and personal challenges. His reflections in the years following his retirement revealed a profound understanding of balance, humility, and the importance of prioritizing what truly matters. One of the key lessons he took from his career was a recognition that no matter how successful or iconic a person becomes, personal well-being must remain central. The demands of hosting a show like Wheel of Fortune, managing live interactions with contestants, maintaining a consistent image, and meeting the expectations of millions of viewers required an emotional energy that few outsiders fully appreciated. Over time, the cumulative effect of this constant attentiveness became apparent, and it was a combination of age, health concerns, and personal reflection that ultimately informed his decision to step down. In his private life, Pat discovered that fulfillment often came from simpler, quieter experiences that had long been overshadowed by professional obligations. Time spent with his wife, Leslie, became a source of renewed joy, a daily reminder of the love and partnership that had sustained him through decades of work and public scrutiny. Moments with his children, Patrick and Maggie, offered an intimacy that no stage, camera, or studio could replicate, allowing him to witness milestones, share stories, and create memories that would last far beyond any television broadcast. These experiences highlighted a universal truth that Pat often reflected upon. Success is measured not only by public recognition or career achievements, but also by the quality of relationships, the care for one's own health, and the ability to be present in the lives of those you love. Pat also spoke often about the importance of legacy, both in professional and personal terms. He recognized that Wheel of Fortune was bigger than any one person, and that its continued success depended on thoughtful planning, mentorship, and respect for the audience's trust. By stepping aside at the right time and guiding his successor, he ensured that the show would remain true to its essence while evolving naturally with the times. In a broader sense, this reflected his philosophy on life, understanding when to lead, when to step back, and when to allow others to carry forward the work you care about deeply. Pat often noted that humility had been a guiding principle throughout his career. Despite his fame and the recognition he earned, he remained grounded, never allowing public perception to dictate his self-worth. He approached both success and challenge with the same steady demeanor that had defined his hosting style, demonstrating that confidence and composure are most powerful when paired with authenticity and empathy. His reflections on his career also highlighted the subtle, often overlooked contributions of consistency, kindness, and reliability. These qualities, rather than showy gestures or dramatic moments, were what had earned him the trust of viewers and the respect of colleagues. Beyond personal philosophy, Pat used his post-retirement years to observe and comment on the evolving television landscape with curiosity and insight. He recognized that the industry had changed dramatically since he first stepped on stage in 1981, with social media, streaming platforms, and instant public feedback transforming both audience expectations and the pressures placed on hosts. Yet, He saw continuity in the enduring need for genuine human connection and thoughtful entertainment. For him, the most important legacy was not the number of episodes hosted or ratings achieved, but the sense of comfort, joy, and shared experience that the show created. Finally, retirement allowed Pat to reflect on the delicate balance between public life and personal fulfillment. He understood that while the applause, recognition, and cultural significance of his work were meaningful, they were ultimately secondary to living a life that honored his health, family, and inner peace. This realization, born of decades on television and crystallized by a near-death experience, shaped the way he approached the final chapter of his career and the years that followed. Pat Sajak's story, therefore, is not only about a beloved television host, but also about a man who understood the importance of self-awareness, the value of relationships, and the courage to step away when the time was right. It is a lesson in balance, foresight, and the quiet strength required to build, sustain, and eventually pass on a legacy that touches millions while remaining true to oneself even after Pat Sajak's departure. The impact of Wheel of Fortune on American culture remained profound, a testament to the careful balance he had maintained between entertainment, relatability, and continuity. For decades, the show had evolved into much more than a simple game. It had become a fixture in the daily lives of viewers, a comforting ritual that families, friends, and even individuals shared across generations. Children learned letters, families gathered in living rooms, and viewers of all ages found solace in predictable, welcoming routine. Pat's approach to hosting, his calm demeanor, dry humor, and ability to highlight contestants rather than himself, played a critical role in shaping this cultural space. He understood that the show's true power lay not in the flashy games or the bright lights, but in creating a safe, consistent, and enjoyable experience for those watching at home.